Samantha Wells sat in her family's small kitchen, gripping the crisp white letter with bold black ink that read, Stanford University, congratulations on your acceptance. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, the moment her parents would beam with pride, wrap her in their arms, and say, "We always knew you could do it. We're so proud of you." But reality was nothing like that. Instead of excitement, there was silence. Her father, Richard Wells, leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. Her mother, Linda, pressed her lips together, staring at the kitchen table as if weighing a life-or-death decision. No smiles, no congratulations. After what felt like forever, her father sighed, his voice heavy. Stanford, that's a prestigious school. But Sam, what about the tuition? Have you thought about the financial side of things? Samantha swallowed hard. Of course, she had thought about it. I got a scholarship, Dad. It covers half of my tuition. If I take out student loans and work part-time, I can make it work. But I need a little help with living expenses. Her mother frowned. Sam, we can't just pull money out of nowhere. We've already invested so much in Nathan's education. Paying for Duke wasn't cheap. Nathan, her older brother, the future doctor, the child they were most proud of. Samantha clenched her jaw. I get that. But isn't tech a stable industry, too? A software engineer can make great money. The field is growing. Her father crossed his arms, his tone patronizing. You're smart, Sam, but be realistic. The tech industry is unpredictable. Every year we hear about layoffs, startups collapsing. Medicine, on the other hand, is stable. We can't justify spending money on a career that's not guaranteed. The words hit like a slap. Samantha felt her stomach twist. For years, she had believed that if she just worked hard enough, if she just proved herself enough, her parents would believe in her, too. But now she saw the truth they never had. Even after she scored a perfect SAT math score, after she won state-level coding competitions, after she wasn't jealous of Nathan. She just wanted a fair chance. The room felt suffocating. Her father delivered the final blow with a voice filled with certainty, as if this was an unchangeable fact. We can't take on more debt for a career that isn't a sure thing, Sam. If you want to go to college, choose a more practical route. UC Davis is a great school. Or start at community college for 2 years and then transfer. Samantha's heart pounded. They really thought she should give up Stanford. Stanford, the dream she had fought for. Stanford, the place where she knew she could grow, where the best professors in the field were waiting. They wanted her to choose the safer path, to settle, to abandon her dreams because they didn't believe they were worth it. She stood up, that he got accepted into one of the best computer science programs in the world. None of it was enough, because she wasn't going into medicine. But you paid for all of Nathan's tuition, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother shook her head as if Samantha was being unreasonable. You can't compare, Sam. Nathan is studying medicine. You're going into computer science. Those are 2 very different things. Doctors will always have jobs. But tech? Who knows? A cold, sharp pain settled in her chest. It wasn't that they couldn't afford to help her. It was that they didn't think she was worth helping. She wasn't angry that they paid for Nathan. She was angry that they never even considered doing the same for her. Her face was calm, but her mind was racing. All right, she said, her voice eerily steady. Her parents looked at her, surprised. They had expected her to argue, maybe beg. But Samantha just smiled faintly. They had made their decision. Now it was her turn. She walked out of the kitchen. But this time, she wasn't the girl trying to prove her worth anymore. If they wouldn't invest in her, she would invest in herself. She wasn't going to fight for their approval. She was going to show them. And by the time she did, she wouldn't need it anymore. Samantha Wells sat in her bedroom, staring at her laptop screen, the glow illuminating the sharp lines of her determined face. Her parents had made their decision. Now it was her turn. If they weren't going to support her dream, she would build it on her own. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she pulled up a blank spreadsheet. Step 1. How much would it take to survive at Stanford? She calculated the tuition balance after her scholarship, the cost of dorms, books, food, transportation. The numbers were brutal. She would need at least $20,000 a year beyond what her scholarship covered. Her stomach clenched. That was more money than she had ever seen in her life. But she had no choice. Dropping out of Stanford was not an option. Transferring to a cheaper school? Not happening. Giving up on her dream? Unthinkable. She had worked too hard to let her parents' lack of belief define her future. She took a deep breath and started making a plan. While her classmates spent the summer celebrating their acceptance letters with vacations and parties, Samantha threw herself into the grind. Morning. She took a job as a barista at a local coffee shop, waking up at 4:30 a.m. every day to open the store. Afternoon. She worked at a tech repair shop, fixing laptops and cracked phone screens for impatient customers. Evening. She built websites for local businesses as a freelance developer, staying up until 2 a.m., eyes burning from screen glare. She lived on ramen, black coffee, and sheer willpower. There were days when exhaustion hit so hard that she felt like her body was shutting down. But every time she thought about quitting, she remembered the silence in the kitchen when she showed them her acceptance letter. She remembered the way her father had dismissed her future as a risky investment. That memory fueled her. Every hour of work, every sleepless night, every drained cup of coffee, it was all proof that she didn't need them. She was going to prove them wrong. By the time she stepped onto the Stanford campus in September, she had managed to save enough for her first semester's housing and books. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She arrived with 2 suitcases, a 5-year-old laptop, and $412 in her bank account. It had to be enough. Stanford was everything she had dreamed of: brilliant minds, cutting-edge technology, world-renowned professors. But it was also a battlefield. Her classmates came from wealthy families, their tuition paid for without a second thought. They had new MacBooks, internships lined up through family connections, and weekends free to study or network. Meanwhile, Samantha was juggling 3 jobs just to survive. 20 hours a week at the university IT help desk, evening shifts tutoring freshmen in math and coding, weekend freelance projects to scrape together extra cash. She barely slept. Her meals were instant noodles and dining hall leftovers from friends who snuck out extra food for her. She spent so much time running from class to work that she sometimes forgot to eat altogether. But she refused to break. She aced her first round of exams, landing at the top of her class in algorithms and data structures. She told herself that once her parents saw her success, they'd finally recognize her worth. They didn't. Thanksgiving break came. Samantha couldn't afford a flight home, so she stayed on campus, one of the few students left in the near-empty dorms. On Thanksgiving Day, she called home. Her mother picked up. "Sam, how are you? We miss you." In the background, Samantha heard laughter, the clinking of silverware, and the familiar hum of the Wells family's annual Thanksgiving dinner. "I miss you too," she said, gripping the phone tighter. Her father's voice chimed in. Nathan just finished his first round of med school exams. Straight A's. His professors say he has an incredible future ahead. Samantha's stomach twisted. Of course. She had been about to tell them that she had made the dean's list, landed a research assistant position, and was surviving despite everything. But before she could even speak, her father cut in. "So, have you reconsidered transferring? You know, to somewhere more affordable." Her heart turned to stone. Even after all this, after surviving the brutal first semester, after proving herself, they still didn't see her success as real. She forced a smile into her voice. "No, Dad, I'm doing great here. This is where I need to be." There was silence. And then, "Well, just think about it. We don't want you struggling too much." Struggling. The irony nearly made her laugh. They hadn't lifted a finger to help her. They had watched her take on 3 jobs, skip meals, and fight for every dollar. And now they were worried about her struggling? She ended the call without telling them about the dean's list, without mentioning the research assistant position, without sharing the victories she had clawed from the ground up, because it didn't matter. They weren't proud of her. They just wanted her to take the easy way out. That night, Samantha stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were dark-ringed, exhaustion carved into her skin. For the first time, she doubted herself. Maybe her parents were right. Maybe she was chasing a stupid dream. Maybe she should have picked the safe path. The doubt crept in, whispering that she was fighting for something impossible. But then another voice, her own, cut through the noise. No, I made it this far. I will not stop now. She was not going to quit. She was not going to prove them right. She would survive. She would thrive. She would succeed on her own terms. And one day, when they finally saw what she had built, she wouldn't need their validation. By then, she would already know her worth. Samantha took a deep breath, sat at her desk, and got back to work. She still had a future to build. The autumn air was crisp as Samantha Wells walked across the Stanford campus, clutching her laptop to her chest. The leaves had started to turn, painting the university in shades of gold and red. Around her, students talked about their Thanksgiving plans, weekend getaways, family reunions, lavish dinners. But for her, there was no trip home. There was no warm welcome waiting for her at the Wells Thanksgiving table, because she couldn't afford the flight, and because, deep down, she wasn't sure she wanted to go back. On Thanksgiving morning, Samantha sat alone in the near-empty dorm, staring at her phone. She had debated not calling at all, but some part of her still wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, her parents would ask about her, care about her, be proud of her. She took a deep breath and dialed. Her mother answered on the second ring. "Sam, happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart." In the background, she could hear the familiar hum of family chatter, clinking silverware, the rich aroma of roasted turkey she could almost taste. For a brief moment, homesickness stabbed through her. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom," she said, forcing a smile into her voice. Then her father's voice cut in, filled with undeniable excitement. "Guess what? Nathan aced his first med school exams. His professors say he has an incredible future ahead of him." Samantha froze. Not a single word about her. Not "How's school, Sam?" Not "How have you been?" Not "We're proud of you too." Just Nathan. Again, her chest tightened. She had made the dean's list. She had pulled off a 4.0 GPA while working 3 jobs. She had fought for her place every single day. But in their world, Nathan's success was the only one that mattered. "That's great," she forced out. Her father barely registered her response before adding, "So, have you thought about transferring? UC Davis is still an option, you know." Samantha inhaled sharply. Even after all this, after proving she could survive, after excelling in one of the toughest programs in the country, they still saw her education as temporary, a mistake waiting to be corrected. Her hands curled into fists. "Dad, I'm not transferring," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "I made the dean's list. I'm working on a research project in AI. I'm doing just fine." Silence. Then, "That's nice, dear," her mother said, in a tone so dismissive it nearly broke her. That was it. That was all her blood, sweat, and exhaustion amounted to in their eyes. "That's nice, dear." Samantha's heart hardened. "I have to go," she said, and hung up before they could say anything else. She stared at her phone, hands shaking, her pulse loud in her ears. She had spent years fighting for their approval, chasing after validation they would never give. And in that moment, something inside her snapped. Maybe she didn't need it. Maybe she never had. That night, Samantha buried herself in work, pouring her anger and frustration into her latest AI project. She had long stopped hoping for her parents to recognize her brilliance, but someone else had. The next week, Professor James Becker, a leading expert in AI, pulled her aside after class. "Samantha, I've been reviewing your work. Your predictive modeling for data compression, it's impressive. You ever think about research?" She blinked. No one had ever asked her that before. "I mean, yeah," she said slowly. "I love it, but I don't really have the time. I'm working a lot just to stay in school." Professor Becker studied her for a moment. Then he said something that would change everything. "Come by my office tomorrow. Let's talk about funding." The next day, Samantha sat in Professor Becker's office as he slid a stack of papers toward her. "This is a research assistant position. It pays triple what you're making at the IT desk. Your project on machine learning for network optimization? I want you to develop it under my supervision. The department will cover some of your expenses, too." Samantha stared at the papers, disbelief crashing over her. This was more than just a job. This was someone who saw her potential. Someone who believed in her enough to invest in her when her own family wouldn't. Her hands trembled as she signed her name at the bottom. For the first time since stepping foot on campus, she felt like she could breathe. That night, she sat in her dorm, staring at her phone. For years, she had let their opinions define her. She had worked herself into the ground, believing that if she just proved herself enough, they'd see her worth. But now, she realized she had been proving herself to the wrong people. She didn't need to impress them. She didn't need their approval. She needed herself. She picked up her phone and opened the family group chat. Her parents had sent another message about Nathan's achievements. She didn't even bother reading it. Instead, she typed, "Hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving. I just got a research position in AI. My tuition and expenses are partially covered now. Just thought you should know." She hit send. "No, do you think I made the right choice? No, are you proud of me?" Because for the first time in her life, she didn't need their validation. She knew she had made the right choice, and she was proud of herself. Samantha Wells walked through the halls of Stanford's computer science department, gripping the key card to her new research office. It still didn't feel real. For the first time since arriving at Stanford, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Her research assistant position had done more than triple her income. It had given her something she had never gotten from her parents: validation, belief, recognition. Not because she begged for it, not because she fought for it, but because she earned it. She no longer needed to burn herself to exhaustion with 3 jobs just to keep up with tuition. She had funding. She had stability. She had people who saw her potential and invested in it. And most importantly, she believed in herself now more than ever. That belief was about to pay off in ways she never expected. A few weeks into her research project, Professor Becker introduced her to Dr. Andrew Patel, a Stanford alum who had founded Neurotech, a rising AI startup specializing in medical diagnostics. When she walked into the meeting, she didn't expect much. But as Dr. Patel flipped through her work, his expression shifted from polite interest to genuine excitement. "This predictive model for neural network optimization. This is groundbreaking work," he said. Samantha felt her pulse spike. "Thank you," she said, keeping her voice steady. "How would you feel about working with us this summer? We're looking for someone to develop AI-driven diagnostics for early-stage neurological diseases. Your algorithms could be key." The words slammed into her like a freight train. This wasn't just a summer internship. This was a game-changing opportunity, a chance to work with one of the fastest-growing AI companies in Silicon Valley, a chance to build something that mattered, a chance to prove, not to her parents, but to herself, that she had been right all along. She took the offer without hesitation. That night, as she walked back to her dorm, she hesitated for the first time in months. Should she call home? For years, she had wanted nothing more than to hear her parents say, "We're proud of you, Sam." But now, she realized she didn't need to hear it anymore. She didn't need their approval. She didn't need their validation. She had built herself without them. Still, out of habit, Not Hope. She dialed her mother's number. The conversation went exactly as she expected. That's nice, dear. But Nathan is considering a specialization in neurology. Imagine what an accomplishment that will be for him. Samantha smiled, not out of sadness, not out of frustration, but because she finally understood. They would never see her as their star, but that was fine, because she wasn't their investment anymore. She was her own. As she hung up the phone, Samantha looked at the reflection in her dorm window. The girl staring back at her wasn't the same girl who had walked onto this campus months ago, desperate for her parents to believe in her. This girl, she didn't need them to. She had made it this far without them, and she was about to go even further, because, while her parents had spent years deciding whether she was worth investing in, she had already bet on herself, and she was winning. The city lights of San Francisco glittered below as Samantha Wells stepped into the sleek, glass-walled headquarters of Neurotech AI. 3 years ago, she had walked onto Stanford's campus with 2 suitcases, a second-hand laptop, and a dream no one but herself believed in. Now, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. At 23, she had risen to director of AI development at one of Silicon Valley's fastest-growing startups. Her algorithms were reshaping medical diagnostics, catching neurological diseases before they became fatal, and she had done it without them. So when her mother's name flashed across her phone that morning, she almost didn't pick up. But curiosity won out. She answered, "Sam, sweetheart." Her mother's voice was dripping with an enthusiasm Samantha hadn't heard before. Not when she got into Stanford. Not when she made the dean's list. We saw the article in Forbes. Neurotech just secured $40 million in Series B funding. Your name was in it. Samantha leaned back in her office chair, staring at the framed Stanford acceptance letter on her wall, the same one her parents had dismissed as a mistake years ago. "Yes, Mom. We've been working hard." Her father's voice cut in. "Listen, Sam, we've been thinking. With investment opportunities like this, maybe we could put some money into your company. You know, as family." Ah, there it was. Not, "We're proud of you." Not, "We were wrong to doubt you." Just a recalibration of their investment strategy. Samantha didn't laugh. She smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "Actually," she said, keeping her voice perfectly even, "I do have an investment opportunity." Her parents perked up immediately. "Really? That's wonderful. We knew you'd make something big." Samantha pulled up a web page on her screen. She sent them the link. The Wells Foundation, providing scholarships to students whose families refused to invest in them. Silence. Then her father cleared his throat. "Sam, what is this?" She leaned back, savoring the moment. "It's a foundation I started. Every year we fund 20 students who remind me of myself at 18, full of potential, but told their dreams weren't practical investments." Her mother exhaled sharply. "We're family, Samantha. Surely that counts for something." Samantha's gaze hardened. "It does. That's why I built this, to make sure other kids don't have to go through what I did." She let that sink in. Then, with absolute finality, she added, "I don't need family investors, but those students, they need someone to believe in them." She heard the quiet shock on the other end of the line. For years, she had let their opinions define her. She had waited, hoped, begged for them to see her worth. Now, she didn't need their recognition, because she already knew exactly what she was worth, and it was more than they had ever been willing to bet on. As she hung up the phone, she didn't feel anger. She didn't feel resentment. She felt free. She had never been their investment. She was her own. The skyline of San Francisco stretched out before Samantha Wells as she stood in the corner office of Neurotech AI, her name emblazoned on the glass door. It was surreal. At 24, she was now the Chief Technology Officer, CTO, of a company valued at $500 million. She had created algorithms that revolutionized medical diagnostics, saved lives, and changed the way hospitals detected neurological diseases. She had done it without her family's belief, without their money, without their help. She had built herself, and now they were here. Her parents were downstairs, waiting in the lobby. They hadn't been invited. They had called 3 times since their last conversation, and she had ignored them each time. But now, they were standing in her building, asking for a meeting. Samantha stared at the security notification on her phone. Years ago, she would have jumped at this moment, a chance to hear them say, "We're proud of you." Now, she was simply curious. She took the elevator down, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she walked toward them. Her father, Richard Wells, looked around the towering glass atrium, clearly overwhelmed. Her mother, Linda Wells, clutched her purse, her eyes scanning Samantha as if seeing her for the first time. "Mom, Dad." Samantha's voice was even, controlled. Her father straightened. "Sam, we wanted to talk to you, face to face." Samantha raised an eyebrow. "You could have called." Again. Her mother exhaled. "Sweetheart, we wanted to say we're proud of you." Samantha tilted her head slightly. There it was, the words she had once fought to hear, but now they felt empty. "You're proud of me?" she repeated slowly. Her father nodded eagerly. "Of course. You've built something incredible. Neurotech is in Forbes. Your work is making a difference." "And now you want to invest," Samantha finished for him, her voice sharp. Their silence confirmed it. Of course, they weren't here to acknowledge her struggle. They were here because she had succeeded without them. Her mother placed a hesitant hand on her arm. "Sam, we just want to be a part of what you've built. You know, as family." Samantha smiled, not out of kindness, not out of anger, but because she finally understood. They would never regret not believing in her. They only regretted that she didn't need them anymore. "You want to be a part of this?" she asked, gesturing toward the vast office space, the company she had sweat, bled, and fought for. Her father nodded quickly. "Yes, exactly. We can invest, support you. You already had your chance." Her voice was calm but absolute. They froze. 3 years ago, I asked for your support. You called my dream risky." She stepped closer, her voice like steel. "When I was working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating ramen to survive, you told me to transfer." Her mother flinched. "Sam, No." Samantha's eyes burned with something stronger than anger. "I am here because I fought for this. I am here because I built this. Without you, without your belief, without your investment." She took a deep breath. "And now, I don't need it." Her father's jaw clenched. "We're your parents, Samantha." "Yes, and that's why I'm going to do for others what you wouldn't do for me." She pulled out a sleek brochure and handed it to them. They read the title. Her father's face paled. Her mother's hand shook as she flipped through the pages, seeing the photos of young scholars, students just like Samantha, but given the chance she had to fight for alone. Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. "You started to foundation?" "Yes," Samantha said, her voice steady. "Every year, we fund students who have the talent but not the family support. Students who, like me, were told their dreams weren't practical, who were dismissed as bad investments." She gave them a cool, measured look. "And I only accept investors who believed from the beginning." Silence. Her parents didn't have a response, because there was nothing left to say. They had written her off, and she had rewritten her own story. Samantha took a slow step back. "Take care." Then she turned, walking away. She didn't look back, because she didn't need to. She had already won. Samantha Wells didn't build her future out of revenge. She built it out of resolve. She didn't need her parents' investment. She didn't need their belief. She only needed her own. Lesson for you: don't wait for permission to chase your dreams. Bet on yourself and win.